North American Great Plains. This expansive land, once so abundant and rich in wildlife, today is in trouble. It is now an ecosystem out of balance. The fight to restore this balance, to save the land and the people who live here, is a battle that affects us all.
This Audubon special is made possible by the people of GE. GE, from aircraft engines to appliances, we bring good things to life.
For 2 centuries, the majestic expanses of the Great Plains have astonished all who came here, and many came. First as lone trekkers, then in greater numbers as homesteaders, and finally in never-ending waves of settlers looking for a better life. In 1 century, they occupied the plains from Texas to Saskatchewan and overwhelmed the Indians, the wildlife, and the land itself. Within a century, the seemingly endless sea of grass was well on its way to being completely plowed under. Stretching from the Rocky Mountains on the west to a fluctuating line along the 98th meridian on the east, the Great Plains cover portions of 10 U.S. states and parts of Canada. They comprise nearly 1/5 of the entire continental United States, but contain less than 3% of its population. No place on earth stays the same. Where there are people, there is change. But few places have changed so quickly and so drastically as the Great Plains. In just a few generations, the heart of this country, which had been a wilderness, became the breadbasket of the world. But at what cost? Large-scale agriculture, extensive use of chemicals, have transformed the prairies, polluted the groundwater, degraded the soils, and nearly destroyed a way of life we all cherish. This is a story about what has happened in the Great Plains in the past 150 years. It's about the mistakes we've made and some of the solutions we've found. For other countries facing similar problems of vanishing frontiers and endangered environments, the battle for the Great Plains is both a lesson and a warning. My father was born and raised in Nebraska. He loved the Great Plains, and he made several films here, including Grapes of Wrath. Today, I have a home here in Montana. But this is a story of people who lived here for generations, whose ancestors settled the plains. They are a determined, self-reliant people whose opinions are as varied as their backgrounds.
You have to live in this country with the balance of nature. You live with nature. You are part of nature in the Great Plains. Nature dictates every move you make out here. And if you try to dominate it, you're going to run into problems.
Everybody looks at the ground now for money. They don't look at the plateaus and the prairie areas and thank it every day.
The settlement of the Great Plains, as one looks back now in the 1990s, was the largest single agricultural and environmental mistake in the settlement of the United States.
I think that the land is better now than it ever was. I think that the ranch and farm people are some of the strongest people that the nation has.
If we were to continue as we are now, we would be degrading this place and turning it into another dust bowl. We've got to think about how we can live here for 10,000 years instead of thinking about this rather short-run little explosion that we've had. I would say that we still have plenty of options, But we cannot predicate those options based on our current way of living.
Just over 100 years ago, this land was a place of wonder, an ecosystem that worked, where humans and animals lived in harmony with the land. For generations, more than 20 Indian tribes flourished on the Great Plains. These tribes hunted, but did not decimate the wildlife. They worked the land, but did not abuse it. They knew that the land was not theirs to dominate. Gerard Baker is a descendant of the Mandan Hidatsa tribes of North Dakota.
We believe that every part of the land and things that grew on the land was spiritual, that had a spirit, was alive, and therefore we had to respect that. And so we believe that the land was sacred at that time. We still believe the land is sacred. We still believe the land has spiritual values for us and can teach us something as people.
For Gerard, all things are connected. Humans, the wildlife, the land itself. The Mandan Hidatsa culture taught him that we all live in a magical world in which everything has a higher meaning. The Mandans, unlike most Plains tribes, were not nomadic. They were an agricultural tribe who lived in sophisticated earth lodge villages along the Missouri River. These villages were a trading center for many of the other Plains Indian tribes. In 1804, the explorers Lewis and Clark spent their first winter among the Mandans.
They were very amazed and they were very fascinated by the structure of the village, about how they lived, about how they constructed their lodges. They had huge, huge gardens. It's hard to look at today or imagine today how big they were. The corn gardens, for example, were bigger than football fields as we know them today, so they were very huge. And it wasn't just a matter of going in and planting or going in and harvesting, but it was a matter, again, of respect for the land, of respect for those crops. Only certain individuals had the rights really to hold the seed or to utilize the seed. They planted the gardens with songs and with prayers and so forth, and everything was always in respect to the earth.
The early explorers were followed by hunters, traders, missionaries, the army, railroads, barbed wire, and the rule of law. And long before the white man slaughtered the buffalo, his diseases destroyed the Indian people. Smallpox killed more Native Americans than bullets. The plains are where the Indians lost their world. What's left today are mostly memories. Crazy Horse, Ghost Dancing, Sitting Bull, Chief Joseph, Red Cloud, Wounded Knee, all Plains history.
We always believed that you can't own anything. The only thing you own is when you die. The only thing you own is your soul, basically, and that's it. You can't take this rock and say, "Oh, this is my rock," nor can you say, "This is my land," because when you go, it's still here. It's still here. And that concept was really different to the Indian people of the Plains, and that's why I think they lost a lot. They lost the Plains, basically because of that.
Gerard Baker's mother, Cora Youngbird Baker, is the head of a large family in the matriarchal Mandan Hidatsa society. In this world, elders carry on their people's oral history.
We always lived along the river because the soil was so good. And we had a community garden. And they raised all kinds of good things there, like corn and great big potatoes. And they had all kinds of squash and different things. And we got along real good. All of a sudden, they said there was going to be a dam coming through, that we had to move out. We didn't want to leave our home behind. But it happened, so we were forced to move.
Long after the Indian Wars were over in the early 1950s, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers built a dam across the Missouri River. Justified as a flood control project, the Garrison Dam put 156,000 acres of Indian land underwater and uprooted 90% of the tribe. The agricultural lifestyle of the Mandan Hidatsa was destroyed forever.
Land means so much to you, just like day. So it was very hard to leave our land behind.
As long as there's people who want to conquer, they're going to keep on conquering. And whoever gets in their way, they can take them with them. Be it trees, be it rivers, you know. They make dams and stop big rivers. We thought that was never possible. We thought there's no way they can put a dam across the Missouri Valley and stop that water. You know, that wasn't even dreamed about, and they did it. And because they did that, they changed the whole culture. They changed the whole people. The name of progress has done a lot of damage. Everything's done in the name of progress. And what is progress? Is progress killing off people? Is progress killing off land? Is progress cutting down trees? When you cut trees, you change rivers. You change ecosystems. Is that progress? You know, that's a question that people need to ask themselves. And when's that progress going to stop? I don't think it ever will. I don't think it ever will until they can't conquer anything. There's nothing left to conquer.
I'm told that when the first homesteaders came to this country, a man on horseback had trouble seeing over some of our native grass. We're talking big, tall grass. Most of the people that came were farmers, and they were concerned about turning this grass under, planting crops. And so therefore I think probably a lot of acres were plowed under and farmed that maybe should never have been broken out with a plow.
But the federal government wanted to settle the Great Plains. The Homestead Act of 1862 promised 160 acres to anyone who could farm this semi-arid land. Immigrants from Europe, land speculators, and Easterners seeking a new life all flocked to this newfound frontier. The wild prairie was turned into a commodity. By 1890, over 6 million people had settled the plains. Homesteaders, accustomed to farming techniques developed in Europe, plowed 12 to 18 inches deep into virgin soil that had not been disturbed since the Ice Age. The grassland roots that held the soil in place were destroyed. Today, farmers still plow the ground. Ed and Norma Elward's grandparents settled in Kansas in the late 1800s. Over the past century, their family has experienced both the good and the bad times of life on the Great Plains.
There are a lot of hardships on a farm, but also you're your own boss, or you always used to be your own boss. Now Uncle Sam kind of helps you along the way.
I like the land, and I'd like to see it taken care of. And I try to take care of it. And I just like to see things grow. It takes a lot of determination at times. In the summer when it gets 110 degrees and the crop's burning up, or in the winter, if the ground starts blowing and it's froze so hard you can't get in a chisel in the ground to work it, and you have to just sit there and watch it blow. Why, that's the hardest thing in the world for me to do. It takes a lot of determination, but it takes a lot of determination for a lot of things, I guess, anymore.
Philosopher, geneticist, and co-founder of the Land Institute in Kansas, Wes Jackson is studying new ways to farm the Great Plains. He has deep concerns about the future of the prairies.
The American experience has been one of dominating and conquering the great American wilderness. But that, of course, has a long history, going back to the early 1600s, where Francis Bacon said that we must bend nature to our will. And that's based on the assumption that we know better than nature. And wherever humans come in with agriculture, we tend to invert what nature does well. We came with vision, but not with sight. We came with visions of former places, but never the sight to see where we were. And we came and then imposed the traditions of the European culture. They worked the ground down to a fine powder. And so we Europeans that came to western Kansas worked it down to fine powder. And then we got that fine powder blowing in under our shingles and under our eaves, settling on ceilings till ceilings collapsed on the kitchen and living room floors of the Great Plains.
Cycles of drought have always occurred on the Great Plains. The terrible Dust Bowl that devastated the region in the mid-1930s was not just the consequence of bad weather. During World War I, European agriculture was disrupted, causing a worldwide grain shortage and doubling the price of wheat. On the plains, in order to fill the need for grain, hundreds of thousands of acres of marginal land were plowed under. The rains came. Harvests were good and profits high. Tractors were readily available, and it was easy to plow more land more often. But in the 1930s, when a severe drought occurred on the plains, millions of acres of soil now lay exposed. The earth simply dried up and blew away. It was one of the greatest ecological disasters in recorded history.
It was so frightening that my brother and sister and I thought the end of the world was coming. That's just the way it looked. It just obliterated everything as it came and come over you, just like night settling down on you. We'd never seen anything like it, and it just, I mean, if you seen one rolling in there today like that, I imagine it'd probably scare you pretty well, too, if the dust had come in like that. I mean, it's unbelievable how those things looked.
I don't remember everything as being black. I remember it as being yellow. You know, the sky would be yellow, everything would be yellow. And if you were unfortunate enough to be out late in the evening to find your way home, if you lived in the country, you had to almost watch the weeds along the ditches. So you would stay out of the ditch and stay on the road because you just couldn't see the road. There'd be dirt blowing and maybe there'd be snow blowing, and it was just really a mess.
So we've learned some hard lessons. And unfortunately, because of what seems to be infinite substitutability of resources, or infinite substitutability of the various technologies, we think that we can go on and on and on. And that just isn't, in my view, isn't going to happen. That's wishful thinking. It's whistling in the dark.
Nevertheless, technology continues to dominate American agriculture. More fertilizer, more chemicals, more combines. Farming as a business has come to depend on size and technology. The costs of expensive machinery, maintenance, and fuel continue to rise, but a bushel of wheat sells for little more than it did 35 years ago. Economically, family farmers are having a difficult time making ends meet. They're being squeezed hard by larger farming operations that dominate plains agriculture. And when small farms are lost, the traditional farm community suffers. A whole way of life is disappearing. The family farm, like this third-generation Kansas homestead of Dale and Diane Beck, is becoming a rarity.
Well, I really believe that this is a dying culture, and the dreams and the hopes of many families have gone down the drain. We can drive around these country roads and see where there used to be 2 or 3 or 4 homesteads in a mile, and now there's maybe none or very widely scattered. The income that's available to make a living is just not here for the young folks to start into this profession.
Dale's son Seth would like to follow in his father's footsteps, but he's worried about the future of the family farm.
I hope there's a future for the farmers in this part of the country. I might like to go into farming one of these days and hope to keep the family tradition alive, I guess you'd say.
Whether or not there is a future for the next generation depends in part on government policies. The farmer has become increasingly dependent on federal subsidies. Subsidies to grow crops or not to grow them, to maximize the land or to let it lie fallow, can account for up to 50% of agricultural income on the Great Plains.
I would be the first to say that the farmer, if he could operate on a level playing field with everyone else, then we don't need subsidies. But you're going to have to be fair about it, and no one's going to get subsidy. That means transportation, that means airlines, that means Chrysler. Anybody that receives any form of a subsidy, if that were all eliminated, then I think you'd find that agriculture gladly would take their income and their profit out of the marketplace. Well, this chart shows us that we only want 8 ounces of that in there to test it.
Technology was once the salvation of the small farmer. Today, it may be his ruin. A little herbicide rescues the crops from weeds. A lot pollutes the groundwater. And for the small farmer who lives on the land with his family, this is a dilemma.
If we did not use chemicals to produce food, it would take much more tillage, which would keep our soils bare longer. We would have an increased risk of wind and water erosion of the soil. By using chemicals, we can cover more acres because we don't have to do so many trips over each acre of land. Thereby, we can cut the costs that it takes us to produce it, which is the margin that we live on. We hope that there's going to be enough young people in this country over the years to continue this culture as we know it now, but it's going to be very difficult with as little incentive as there is to stay.
Not more than a day's drive from Dale Beck's farm, outside of Meadow Grove, Nebraska, Bob Warwick runs a very different kind of operation.
Come here! Come on.
He believes that the small family farm can survive, but that its future lies more in diversity and less in technology.
I really think that's the secret to successful farming is to have as many options as possible in your farming enterprise and to keep diverse, and so that if economic problems hit one sector of your farm economic picture, why you can always, you've got another one that you can rely on.
Warwick is practicing a process that has come to be known as sustainable agriculture, a farm in harmony with nature that does not deplete its resources.
Sustainable agriculture is the prudent use of less chemicals, less fertilizers. It's the wise use of resources for the longest possible time that farmer can farm the land. See, this is the secret of sustainable agriculture, is a sustainable system of resource use that keeps the fertility high without polluting the groundwater. Once you start using resources up, whether it's lowering the groundwater, polluting the groundwater, or losing soil resources, that's an unsustainable system. Eventually, you're going to run into problems. This country is very unforgiving, and we've got to take care of these resources. We have lost in this area over half of our topsoil, and we've only been farming it for a little over 100 years. And that's a terrible indictment of the way we've used resources.
One resource we are using up very quickly is water. 40 years ago, the invention of the center pivot sprinkler system changed the ecology of the Great Plains. The center pivot can irrigate up to 600 acres at a time by pulling up water from underground. A triumph of technology, except that it's being so overused that we're depleting the High Plains Aquifer, a vast underground reservoir that stretches from Texas to South Dakota. If it were above ground, it would cover the whole United States to a depth of 1.5 feet. Yet it is being drawn down so quickly that it is already practically used up in some areas and polluted by agricultural chemicals in others. The center pivot is an example of a short-term technological solution that creates long-term environmental consequences. Ecologists have urged the developing nations of the world to take a hard look at technological quick fixes and learn from our mistakes.
People in the West have always thought that the land is meant to be used and that man has a right to use resources as he sees fit. And it's been a type of a boomtown mentality. And we've had that just recently, back in the 70s, when we had this tremendous irrigation boom out here. We had absentee ownership, corporate farming, and it was because profits were to be made and taken away, and with no thought to the community, the small town, or the people that live there. You know, I can't say that the Homestead Act was wrong. My ancestors came over here because the land was free and it was a chance to start a new life. And so I think it provided those people with an economic opportunity that they just would have no other place. But in the process, I think wildlife and the prairies were hurt. There's no doubt about it.
Come on, Spooky Flame.
The settlement of the Great Plains has had a devastating effect on wildlife. Predator species like the fox, coyote, wolf, and bear were killed outright because they posed a threat to domestic livestock. Others lost their natural habitat as resources were diverted for agricultural uses. For example, the beautiful sandhill crane uses the Platte River in Nebraska as a critical migratory stopover. But irrigation and municipal projects have reduced peak river flow by nearly 70%, posing a threat to the crane population. Similar problems are occurring with other migratory waterfowl as wetlands across the plains disappear. Today, many people are trying to bring back the wildlife and repopulate this once vast Serengeti of the West.
We're welcoming back the wild animals. And we're going to have to welcome them back if we're to ever be able to discover America. But what we're going to have to do is redefine ourselves as Americans. And I think that our primary task is going to be to explore what it means to become native to this place in the modern technological world. And in order to become native to this place, it's going to require that we start with the question, what was here? What will nature require of us here? What will nature help us to do here?
If there's one lesson that maybe we could learn from the history of the Great Plains and what people have gone through out here for the past 100 years is that we should care for our resources. We should care for our land, care for our communities, and care for our people. It's going to be a slow process, though. I think that this takes time. It takes education. It may even take generations to become this. But I think it's imperative that we do that. If not, why, I think some scenarios that are painted through global warming, pollution, that it's going to overwhelm us.
Oh, Captain, let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Down the bend up the hole. Let's go. Hut, 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 hut.
If there is one image from the American West that's known round the world, it's the cowboy. The cowboy is how we like to see ourselves: hardy, independent, necessary. After the buffalo were nearly eliminated from the prairies, cattle ranching became a major industry on the plains. By 1880, there were hundreds of thousands of longhorns grazing on the open prairies from Texas to Montana. Huge cattle drives seasonally move thousands of animals to better pasture. For the past 100 years, ranching has been a way of life on the Great Plains. In the sandhills of Nebraska, the Spencer family traces its roots back to 1886. They are cattle ranchers. This area, once called the Great American Desert, is now considered some of the best cattle country in the nation. Dale Spencer believes that his family has improved the land since his great-grandparents first settled here.
I don't think you could talk to a farmer or rancher who doesn't have an appreciation for wildlife and the land. I think they're the true environmentalists. And that may some people may snort at that analysis, but I think if some of those people actually came out and talked to us and met the people and saw what they're doing, I think they'd understand that. Well, that's why we're here. We have an appreciation for this environment.
Dale's parents, Don and Doris, have a deep connection to the land and have a commitment to improve their place for the next generation of Spencers.
Our grandparents homesteaded here in 1886, and no doubt it must have been terribly tough. They first built a sod house to live in. This was a treeless country, and there's very little vegetation. The old-timers tell us that in the late 1800s and early 1900s, it was about all they could do to step from one clump of grass to another.
We have a lot of pride that the grandparents did come and struggle to homestead this land. And now our sons are here, and we're grateful for that.
Like their parents, Dale and Mike Spencer are independent and self-reliant. They definitely want to carry on the family ranching tradition.
It's really neat having family operations and seeing sons involved with their fathers and everything. You know, Dad tells things about the way Grandpa did things and the insights that he had, the things that he learned. And of course, it's a continual growing process. We all, you know, we're always changing things, but still, right at the base of everything is still I guess, a value or appreciation for the way things that you have to take care of the land. And I think it's really important that you have those things that are passed down from generation to generation.
I think this lifestyle, it will continue because there's no other use for this land that is as harmonious as our use, I don't think. Where we live on this land, we look at the long picture. We keep it for us, keep it for our kids, so we have to make sure this land is going to be good for the family in the future, and so we're very concerned about keeping the land natural and productive.
I hope that the families continue to be the stewards of the land, and I think there's a people and a way of life out here that's too important to lose. I hope that things stay the way they are. This is it's very pure. You know, we've got clear blue skies, we don't have smog, and you need places like that in the world.
Charlie Conley has been a sheep and cattle rancher near the Wyoming-Montana border all his life. He sees the rancher as widely misunderstood.
I think that man is supposed to dominate his environment, and the land is his environment. Dominate is not necessarily a negative word. It's the way we live. It's part of life. We have to dominate. I think the land governs us as much as any employer ever would. The land dictates what we do, when we do it, and I think if you're a good livestock man, you take care of your livestock. I've known a lot of cowboys that working for practically nothing. They would swim a river in hell in order to take care of their livestock.
In the American West, huge numbers of sheep usually attract coyotes, and all sheep ranchers must come to terms with these predators one way or another.
You own an animal, and you have an obligation to that animal, and you feel so sorry when you go out and find your animal wasted. You've worked to save it when it was born, you've tried to care for it, you fed the mother in the wintertime, and you go out and find maybe 8 or 10 lambs just dead in a row across the hills where the coyotes have just come through and bit them on the head or bit them on the back and left them. And you feel sorry for your animal. It's not just the dollars and cents loss, although that is what says whether or not you're going to stay in business. It's the kind of the feeling of shame that you were not able to protect an animal that depended upon you. And that hurts. The dinosaurs are gone. The saber-toothed tigers are gone. There are a lot of things that have disappeared from the earth, and other things have come on. And I think it's just the way life is. I don't think you can just shut a country up. You can't stop the storms, you can't stop the lightning from hitting and burning the area. And you can't stop people trying to make a living. People are trying to survive and be happy. It's just part of life.
All over the Great Plains, people are trying to make a living, but it is becoming harder and harder to survive. Many are leaving the land. In Nebraska, 50 of the state's 52 Plains counties lost population over the last 10 years. John Gardner has seen most of his town pack up and drift away.
This is definitely a dying culture out here. You can see it every day in any of these towns or countryside, even as far as that goes too, even on your farms. The young ones can't stay there. It just keeps it dying off. When the old boy gets sold, he sells her out, and that's it. Just less and less. Gosh, the population out in your rural areas has dropped off a lot. I'd say the average, I bet you the average age of people right here in town, I bet you she'll average out to, oh gosh, I'm kind of a young one, 71. They'd be probably 80, I wouldn't doubt it a bit here in town.
As small towns die, families move on to the next larger town. Here, the spirit of the prairie culture can still be found. But behind the gaiety, the reality is undeniable.
There still is the basic question that the region hasn't faced of, if it's such a wonderful place, and it is, how come the young people have to keep leaving? How come they leave reluctantly? How come, however much pain they cause their families when they leave, they do have to leave?
Thanks, Bob.
Frank Popper doesn't live on the plains. He is a professor of urban studies at Rutgers University in New Jersey. He and his wife, Deborah, have studied the Great Plains and think they know why it's in trouble.
We tried to put in too many people. We tried to put in too much farming, too much ranching, too much building, too much drawing down of the water, too many railroads. Tried to put too many people into a land and too much agricultural production into a land that just couldn't take it. I'll focus on why that work convinces us that much of the fate of the plains lies in a vision that we call the Buffalo Commons.
Popper has a radical and upsetting proposal. Instead of subsidizing marginal farmers in communities that no longer work, he suggests returning the land to the natural prairie and the buffalo, creating parks, encouraging tourism.
There are going to have to be changes.
I see that Mr. Popper and his wife chose to look at the Great Plains as a means for the buffalo concept. And it puzzles me how somebody from New Jersey would focus their attention on this. Why don't you work on the sewage problems over in the eastern states?
Wherever Frank Popper goes, he catalyzes lots of heated discussion. One thing for certain, he's not a popular figure on the Great Plains.
I was born and raised here in the Sand Hills on the family ranch, which has been in the family now for 107 years. And it's part of me. And when you say to give that back to the buffalo and, you know, depopulate it, that's foreign to me, and I can't go along with it.
I don't think that someone who doesn't live here should be able to come in and say, oh, we've looked you over, we've done a study. You know, you really don't need to be here anymore.
The people here own this land, and their fathers before them owned that land, and they take care of the land. And as this gentleman said earlier, the land takes care of us, and that's why we're here. And we'll be here for a good long time. And that's no kidding.
There are people living on the Great Plains who are trying to make a difference, who believe you must live with nature rather than fight against it. Near the fabled Badlands of South Dakota, Dwayne Lammers is trying to reestablish a balance of nature that existed for centuries on the Great Plains. He and his brother Dan raise buffalo, or more properly, bison. When the white man first arrived, there were 30 million bison on the Great Plains. By 1900, there were fewer than 1,000.
Trying to wipe out the buffalo was a tremendous mistake. We've only begun to understand some of the mistakes connected with that. I think it was an animal we felt that just didn't fit progress. And, you know, so we just took and tried to get them out of the way and got rid of them. We didn't think about using them in a positive manner. And those animals being a part of our environment rather than trying to exclude them from our area. One of the advantages of the buffalo that I see is the fact that they've evolved for many years, and it's been survival of the fittest. They can survive in extreme cold on just grass and snow. They don't need hay, they don't need fresh water all the time. They have tremendous survival characteristics that help them through all the things that this environment can dish out to them.
The Lammers used to raise cattle, and a few years ago they switched to buffalo, and they're doing just fine. There's a demand for buffalo meat, which is relatively low in fat and cholesterol, and for the hide, which is used for clothing and Indian arts and crafts. Many ranchers are concerned about the dangers of raising buffalo. They're big, wild, and sometimes unpredictable. But Dwayne says buffalo can actually be easier to handle than cattle. He's teaching his 2 sons the secrets of the trade. Devin is just getting the hang of it. And 9-year-old Austin works side by side with his dad.
When I grow up, I'd like to be a rancher and raise buffalo. you can go out with your family and just chase them around. I'd like to be like my dad when I grow up, because you have all this place to be, and I guess you don't really need to be so crowded. And I'd like to raise buffalo and horses and have about as much as my dad did.
My dreams for my children and the people who will be here in the years to come will actually to see an area much the way it was prior to when the white man came here. When we're out riding, it's hard to express. You just have a really strong, good feeling about riding when you're out with buffalo or out on the prairies here. And I think it has to do with the fact that we're working with bringing an animal back that was nearly extinct. There's just something about seeing the buffalo back on the prairie.
In the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, an hour and a half from Denver, the Lassiter Ranch looks much like the prairie did before the white man arrived. On this ranch, they use no chemicals for weed control and never allow the killing of predators. In fact, the ranch has become a sanctuary for wildlife. Rather than dominating nature, Dale Lassiter believes that man must understand the intricate cycles of the natural world.
I think the major mistake that we've made on the Great Plains and continue to make in many areas is in viewing each aspect of this resource and life here as separate compartments. We have to look at the whole. We cannot look at soil erosion, at population, at food production, at insects, at weeds as separate issues. They're all a part of the same issue.
For Lassiter, raising cattle is an important component in keeping the prairie in balance. However, some environmentalists have suggested that all cattle should be removed from public lands, allowing the prairies to return to their natural state. Lassiter disagrees.
Anyone who thinks that domestic livestock of any variety should all be taken from the grazing lands of the West simply doesn't understand what the role of those animals is. This land has to have hooved grazing animals. It needs the impact of these animals, the herd impact. These grasses need to be harvested to be healthy and vigorous. This is all part of the way this natural system works.
Overgrazing has often been a problem on the plains. Fenced-in cattle will keep eating young shoots until a plant is damaged, roots and all. Although most ranchers move their cattle seasonally to save the grasses, Lassiter moves his cattle every few days.
We now understand the great importance of timing in terms of overgrazing. Overgrazing is not just a function of how many animals there are there. It's how long plants are exposed to grazing and being regrazed that's really the critical factor. As a result of this awareness of timing, we're moving our cattle with greater frequency, and the timing of those moves is based on the calculation of the day we leave any given pasture, of not wanting to return to that pasture until every plant that's been grazed there has had a chance to fully recover.
To prevent continual grazing, Lassiter has divided this field into 11 pie-shaped pastures that open onto a center watering hole. In an effort to emulate the patterns of migrating herds like the buffalo, who graze intensively and then move on, Lassiter routinely moves his cattle from one pasture to the next. The cattle business, he says, is a simple business. The only difficulty is to keep it simple. On this ranch, Lassiter practices what he preaches. Even weeds and the burrowing prairie dog, the bane of farmers for generations, have a place here.
Right here we have, as you can see, tremendous amount of bare ground. Here in the middle we have one lone blue grama grass. Lots of bare ground. We can see evidence of water running off. We have a couple of antelope tracks coming through here, but otherwise a very hard-packed, capped surface. Here we have a red ant bed, perhaps 6 or 8 feet in diameter, in this pile of small rocks. Many of us might say, well, this is in the way, it's taking up space or it's crowding out something desirable. But actually, as we see over time, these red ants, along with all these other burrowing animals, are doing something very important. They're aerating the soil. They're allowing places where moisture can go into the soil and be held rather than running off the land. So this is a very, very important function. This pile will be inactive in a couple of years, and grasses will be growing here. We'll find a lot of western wheat growing here where these ants have done this tilling of the soil. This is part of this healing process of getting the land back to its fully productive, diverse, complex state. We haven't restored this land to what its full potential is, but I think we're very, very much on that road. When I'm out here on the land, I have a wonderful feeling of freedom, but perhaps even greater than that, I have a great feeling of awe at the way this natural world is put together. I think it's a very humbling experience for any of us to be out here in the natural world and realize how every tiny detail is perfectly organized and perfectly orchestrated to maintain this fabulous renewable resource that we call the Great Plains.
The people of the Great Plains exhibit an unusual combination of self-reliance and vision, a love of place and connection to the land. Those who have survived have endured many hardships, and many have come to understand that we must work with nature and not against it. This film offers no simple answer, no single right way. Every ecosystem on this planet has its own set of rules, its own potential, and its own limitations. For other countries faced with problems of their own vanishing wilderness, there are lessons to be learned from the Great Plains. We must understand and respect the land and know its limits. Place less faith in technology and short-term solutions. Learn to live in harmony with the ecosystems that have evolved over thousands of years. If not, we'll all be losers on this planet.
The other people, I guess, of the world that are facing the same problems that we went through and that we are still facing, what I would say is don't give up. They have a means to fight back, and that way is through education. And that's the key. But always remember who you are. Always remember where you came from.
Well, if I had a message to the world, I would have to say that we need an evolutionary and an ecological understanding of our place in it. We are at home here, and that the frontier era in which we went for longitude and latitude, and then fresh out of both, we went for altitude and a space program, that era is over, and that this is the consequence of the colonizing mind. Well, it's time to quit being colonizers and to decide to become native to this place, this planet, and our local places. You cannot save a planet. You can only love a planet, and to love the planet really means loving the particular places on the planet. And if we are astronauts, we are Earth's astronauts. We are not creatures that are very fit for any place else in the universe, and that this is our place.
The earth is alive. People need to understand that. The earth is alive. The earth has spirits. And it's just not an object that we can take advantage of, because we will lose if that's the case.
This Audubon special is made possible by the people of GE. GE, from aircraft engines to appliances, we bring good things to life.
The companion book to the Audubon television specials, Audubon Perspectives, Rebirth of Nature, is available in bookstores and libraries nationwide.
This is PBS.
Video cassettes of this program can be purchased for educational use only by calling 1-800-328-PBS1. Home video sales are not available through this offer.